Hello and welcome to Hysteria. I'm Erin Ryan.
And I'm Alyssa Mastromonaco.
Alyssa, what is the strangest thing that you never leave the house without?
Post-it notes.
What?
Erin, I'm gonna send you a picture when we're done recording. The dashboard of my car looks like a beautiful mind. It's covered in Post-it notes with notes I write myself instead of texting and driving.
Cool. I think that's probably a good way to make it so that people don't break into your car because they're like, I don't want to get involved with this person.
Yeah, who's this madman?
I don't want to get involved at all. I'll break into the car that looks clean like a normal person has it.
That's true.
I want to talk about a news story. I mean, like, we're going to get into some serious stuff, but we like to start with something stupid because there's so much stupid stuff out there. Let's take a little trip to Arkansas, shall we? Arkansas, beautiful state with bad politics. I was there last December and I saw 2 dead dogs on the side of the road, which,
God.
Yeah, not in the same place. There was just like 2 dogs that had been independently hit by cars. Nobody had done anything about.
It's like that Indigo Girls song, Chicken Man. Dead dog on a highway.
Yeah. I mean,
anyway, it's terrible and gives me a nightmare, and it's why I can't really listen to that song.
I feel like you don't want to be in a place where people are very unkind to dogs, but you don't want to be in a place where people are like too nice to dogs compared to how nice they are to people. You know?
Agree. It needs the right balance.
Right. Like right after I got back from that trip where we had gone through Arkansas and been like, oh, well then, this is the relationship with dogs. I was at a Whole Foods in Silver Lake in Los Angeles, and I saw a woman who was carrying a she was carrying a like Chihuahua in like a custom purse case into Whole Foods, walking past like some homeless people asking for money, and I was like, that's too nice to dogs. You don't want to be too nice.
You want to be nice to dogs, nice to humans, nice to cats.
Yes,
100%. And not nice to weasels.
Not nice to weasels. I mean, weasels are fine. Just
weasel people, not weasel
exactly.
animals.
The weasel animals, you just got to like protect your chicken coop from the weasel animals. But otherwise, just leave them alone. Let them eat other stuff. Okay, so Arkansas. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who we all can remember for weirdly having half of the media rush to her defense when Michelle Wolf made fun of her bad makeup.
For God's
whatever.
sake.
Yeah. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is the governor there. She's a wildly popular. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Difficult to
swallow.
I
don't get it. But she has been. Do you remember like all of those Trump officials who, when they got access to like, you know, the privileges of being in the executive branch or being close to power, they all acted like Beverly Hillbillies.
100%.
Like, do you remember, I think it was the former HHS Secretary Price who made an assistant drive around to get like lotion from the Ritz-Carlton or something? Like it was.
Oh, yes. It was bad.
Yeah.
Using government things for the wrong things.
For like ridiculous things. So that like, for like, I don't know, Beverly Hillbilly behavior. You know what I mean? Like McMansion Hillbilly lifted $70,000 truck. Like a lot of money and no class sort of behavior, right? Sarah Huckabee Sanders truly sort of embodies that. There is a little bit of a firestorm in Arkansas right now because she bought a $19,000 podium.
Like what?
Yeah, a podium, like a thing to stand behind. Yeah, a thing to stand.
It's not even nice looking. It's stupid looking.
It is stupid looking, and the Arkansas Democrat Gazette has been all over this story. You can read about it on arkansasonline.com, and that's Arkansas with an S at the end because it's ridiculously spelled. Anyway, the Republican Party of Arkansas reimbursed $19,029.25 to the state for the cost of the governor's office purchasing a podium with a check dated last Thursday. Now, the reason that this is kind of a story is because the podium was purchased in June, and it wasn't until people started asking questions like, hey, what's going on with this like fancy ass podium that the inaugural fund reimbursed the state? What do you make of this, Alyssa? $19,000 podium.
Erin, when you texted this to me this morning, what did I say? I said, this is a storyline in Veep. And it actually is. Except, you know what? Selena Meyer's crate that she stood on was only $1,200, not $19,000. I mean, let me tell you something. Someone is investing in her future. Like Sarah Huckabee Sanders thinks that she's going to be governor for a good long time. And she's just like, I want it perfect. I want the podium that I want. But it really is like, you would think if someone was going to drop that kind of money on a podium, I don't know, it would be like bulletproof or something. But this is like a real skinny podium. It's like it offers no protection. I see nowhere to put a cup of water underneath it if you want to. It seems like not good value for anyone who's donating to her funds dollar. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, it's a banana, Michael. What's it cost? $10? Like it's that sort of vibe. So podium should not be $19,000. So the podium, according to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, was purchased on June 14th, right before Sanders left for a trip to Europe, a trade mission. I didn't know that Arkansas was doing a lot of direct trade with Europe. So they're sort of like falling all over themselves to make excuses for this expensive podium. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, meanwhile, has been doing some kind of serious stuff when it comes to trying to obscure who she's meeting with and where she's going. She's trying to amend her state's FOIA laws to make it so that it is hard for people to know where she's going, what her agenda is. It's pretty slimy. It's pretty sleazy. And
the reason it's bullshit is they're trying to subvert FOIA laws, which is bullshit. And she is doing it in the guise. And this is something, Erin, for all my years in government that I really can't abide. She says it's for her protection. It's for her protection. It's protecting her family. People shouldn't know where she is. What it is trying to do is obfuscate how she's traveling. Is she on a private plane? Is she flying commercial? What is she doing? And it's, if I were in Arkansas, I'd be pretty fucking pissed.
Yeah, I would be too. And I would make sure that my dogs were indoors or at least on, kept in an enclosure that they can't escape because people do not slow down for them down there. Okay, on to the news. So, there's been a lot of labor action happening. The WGA just reached a tentative agreement with the movie producers, and the strike is now officially over, I guess, until, unless the guild rejects it. But for now, writers can return to work. So that's really good news. The UAW continues to be on strike, and it seems like they're kind of winning the publicity war of that. One thing I kind of wanted to get into, though, is something that I've noticed, I've seen people point it out, and that's the way that the mainstream media covers labor action from the perspective of trying to frame labor action in a way that, like, how does this affect you, the consumer? And that's the only time that business reporting, for the most part, is framed like, it's the only time that it's framed like that. So UAW goes on strike. I saw some news coverage that was like, how is this going to affect the cost of a car for you? Is this going to make cars more expensive? But, when the executive compensation is announced or quarterly earnings for Ford or whatever are happening, you don't see like, the, CEO of Ford is making a badillion dollars this year. How is that going to affect the price of a car? Or shareholders are getting this dividend. How is this going to make you pay more for a car? No, it's always these people who are trying to fight for an equal pay increase to the person at the top of the company, the person whose labor makes the thing that the company sells. It's always like trying to, I don't know, it's trying to pit the people who are not at the top against each other. And I am not in favor of it. I think it's bad.
No, Erin, I have had huge issues over the past couple of weeks with how the media has covered all the strikes and the labor action. It's like, I feel couple things. One, the UAW strike. Part of what I have been so totally annoyed by, one, in almost every report that you watch on television, they frame the strikers as like aggressors, right? That this is a rowdy bunch of people and they are, petulant. There's always this like toddlers acting out, need to be controlled sort of like vibe to all of the reporting. And I felt like if you watched, especially around the UAW, very few mainstream media reporting included the fact that these very workers who were setting out to strike were doing so because during the financial crisis in 2008, they took cuts to keep the companies afloat so that because everybody was falling apart, you know, someone in the Obama administration during this time had wanted to put on a bumper sticker, GM is alive and bin Laden is dead. Like those were our accomplishments, right? And the UAW helped GM stay alive. And part of what they were doing now was just wanting to be made whole from the sacrifices that they made. And that was really underreported across like the entire spectrum of media. And with the WGA, when you saw the reports, if like my husband likes to be a Hysteria media monitor, he'll send me a lot of articles in the morning when he wakes up. And I'll be like, and if they were business, if it was CNN Business, CNBC, any of those, I'd be like, it's an AMPTP leak. Like that's, can't take that seriously because it was always, if you read it, it was always very much from the perspective of they're negotiating. And if there's not a deal by Sunday, then there's not going to be one till after Christmas. And it's like, okay, no one from the WGA, like that's crazy. Nobody did that. And so it makes it feel like a reporting of leaks and not a reporting of a story.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the beginning of the WGA strike, I saw some reporting that was like, what does this mean for your favorite shows? What does it mean for your favorite shows? And it's like, okay, like I think it was nipped in the bud pretty quickly by a successful social media push from writers whose job, you know, they're literally very good at writing. They're very good at like getting messages across, right? So the social media kind of war over messaging was kind of what that was corrected pretty quickly. It was like, this is how much the CEO makes. This is how much writers make. You know, it was really like the war of messaging was lost very, very quickly and resoundingly. I think with the UAW, it's been a little bit more, it's been a little bit less of a quick smackdown of that messaging. Like, actually, you know, the cost of a car is not something that can be entirely attributed to how much the workers on the lowest rungs of the pay scale are being paid. I'm really tired of pretending like rich people exist in this world that doesn't affect us at all. Like it's when in reality, they're like sucking the blood out of everything below them. It's like trickle up economics. Everything is being sucked up to them. I mean, and it's embarrassing to me to watch mainstream media cover it that way. I find it to be just like, we should have learned, like, don't you know better? You should know better.
And have you noticed how few, now we have talked to Kim Kelly, who is a reporter who covers labor politics. We've talked to her a couple times on the show. But have you noticed how few times on television there's ever like a labor reporter?
Yeah, exactly. Business reporting is from the perspective of like the business. And it's like not, there's something kind of dismayingly non-adversarial about it. You know, like very rarely are they actually concerned with like the exploitative structure of the thing that they're reporting on. And yeah, I guess that's how people kind of get away with these egregious violations of ethics and morals and decency over and over again. Speaking of egregious violations of ethics and morals and decency, JP Morgan is in some trouble, Epsteinian trouble. JP Morgan is going to pay $75 million over claims it enabled Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking. What?
Yikes.
You know those news stories?
Good.
The Epstein story is one of those news stories that made me feel crazy. Like, oh my God.
Like, how's this still happening?
There's like, there is like actually, or there was when he was alive, a network of wealthy and powerful people that essentially existed for the purposes of sex trafficking young girls. Like, holy shit, that makes me feel crazy. And JP Morgan was complicit. This is from NPR. This is not from Coast to Coast AM. This is from NPR. JP Morgan Chase agreed on Tuesday to pay $75 million to the U.S. Virgin Islands because JP Morgan says $55 million of the settlement will go toward local charities that provide assistance to victims of domestic abuse and trafficking and other crimes. Of that amount, $10 million will be used to create a fund to provide mental health services for Epstein survivors. It's just crazy. That's the Virgin Islands, by the way, is where Epstein had an estate. And the country sued JP Morgan last year, alleging that financial services giant enabled Epstein's recruiters to pay victims and was indispensable, quote, indispensable to the operation and concealment of Epstein's trafficking enterprise. Ah!
Yikes!
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. JP Morgan has already agreed to pay $290 million in June in a class action lawsuit that involved victims of Epstein's trafficking crimes.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
I mean, good. We're glad that people are, getting help that they more than deserve.
Mm-hmm.
But my God, JP Morgan.
Yeah.
Girl, what you doing?
I know. I mean, like I said, this story makes me feel insane. And then, finally, the end of the final kicker of the story, Epstein died by suicide in a federal jail in 2019. Man, I feel like it was a real Murder on the Orient Express type situation.
Yeah, definitely.
So many people preferred him to no longer be alive after he was apprehended. One more thing before we finish talking about kind of the upside down way that we talk about big entities that are complicit in causing harm. President Biden was on the picket line.
Yes.
That is cool.
I was into it.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I also wanted to say one more thing is that the president of UAW, I get the impression that a lot of people are like low-key horny for him.
I mean, honestly, aren't you a little bit?
A little, yes. A little, but it's just like very.
And Erin, coming from me, that means something.
He's just like a normal looking, like middle-aged dude. There's nothing handsome really about him. But yeah, I think everyone's a little horny for him.
Somehow Mark Wahlberg will play him in a movie someday.
No, not Mark. Mark Ruffalo, the superior
Mark Ruffalo.
He can do it. He can do it. He's a great actor. No, I'm not being sarcastic. I sound like I'm being sarcastic. Mark Ruffalo.
No, I know you're not being sarcastic.
Legit a good actor. Wahlberg, middling. All right. All right, Alyssa, what else do we have today?
You know what? We were enjoying some good ACLU vibes. We were enjoying some good news, the ACLU way. In case anybody missed it, earlier this week, the Supreme Court refused. Erin, SCOTUS refused to consider changing their June ruling about Alabama's congressional district maps. Okay, so now Alabama will probably end up with a second Black majority district. In case people were not tracking it, Alabama GOP lawmakers again approved a congressional map with only one majority Black district, flouting the Supreme Court's decision that they provide more political representation for the state's Black residents, which are about 27% of the state. So the GOP is like, okay, this is what we're doing. And the Supreme Court smacked them on the nose and said, absolutely not. You were not listening. You will not disrespect our authority.
Respect my authority.
And that is great news because now Alabama currently has 6 Republicans and 1 Democratic member of Congress, and they may pick up another Democrat.
That's good. That's good. We need all the Democrats we can get. I think what's super funny about this is that the Supreme Court really hates the Voting Rights Act. Really hates it.
Yeah.
And so the fact that they were like, Alabama, no. Means
God
that,
damn it.
The Alabama was so just like blatantly like, I don't know, we just shouldn't have to do it. Like just completely lazy in making their case. They didn't even make an effort to try to pretend that what they were doing was okay.
No.
They just sort of like, I mean, I remember a year ago, I don't know, what is time? But I remember saying that like, some conservative lawyers representing conservative like activist interests could go before the Supreme Court and just spend their entire time in front of the court blowing raspberries, making fart sounds and still win. Like they don't even have to do anything. But I think we have found the limit of like the raspberry blowing that the Supreme Court will accept. Yeah. And that is
they're
what
like, they go, don't give me
state of Alabama.
Don't give me. It's like, I appreciate that I'm going to be super Gen X right now, but it's like back in the day when mom would be like, oh, you want to cry? I'll give you something to cry about. The Supreme Court's like, don't make me tell you twice. And you just did, and don't do it again.
Yeah. I mean, there would be something, look, narratively interesting, constitutionally like absolutely catastrophic, but narratively interesting if you're just like watching life unfold as though you're watching a movie and just kind of dissociating. Something interesting would be if the power of the Supreme Court, this activist conservative Supreme Court, was eroded by the fact that a completely right-wing cuckoo banana state refused to follow
just went
their
too
orders.
far.
Well, like, if just imagine if Alabama's like, no, and they just kept doing it. It's like the Supreme Court has no enforcement arm. The Supreme Court has no army. They have no police. They just like rely on everyone just being like, okay, yep, fair enough. The court said to do it, so we're going to do it. But like, imagine if Alabama just is like, no. And like, that's the constitutional crisis that completely undermines the power of the court. And from there, other states can just be like, you know what? We don't fucking care. We're going to just start doing, like in the state of Wisconsin this week, Dane and Milwaukee counties just resumed providing abortion services. I think there's like one clinic in each county because legal interpretation of the pre-Civil War ban on abortion has been, a judge said, that applies to feticide. That does not actually apply to abortion. And so Dane and Milwaukee counties were like, cool, we're going to start doing abortions again. And a bunch of like anti-abortion activists are like, we should put the doctors in jail now. And people in the counties are like, no. Like,
no, you're not. Stop yourself.
Yeah. Interesting chaos, but congratulations to the people of Alabama for actually kind of getting a little bit closer to approaching a democracy. And congratulations to America for probably getting another Democrat in the House of Representatives. One more thing today, there was a study that came out this week confirming a hunch of mine and yours, Alyssa. It turns out that women pay billions with a B, billions more out of pocket for healthcare than men do. So that's according to a new report from Deloitte that said women pay $15.4 billion more than men do out of pocket for healthcare without even considering maternity costs. So like, like at first I saw this and I was like, oh yeah.
Subtract all maternity costs, still paying billions more.
Yes, exactly. And that's partly because women actually go to the doctor more often than men do. Men literally won't go to the doctor until they're in like stage 4 of a terminal illness. But it also seems that women's issues are just like not covered by insurance, or we get treated so badly at so many doctors' offices that we have to travel around like a small town carnival, singing their song of their symptoms, like, hey, I've got some pain in my lower back. And the doctor's like, you're depressed. Here's some birth control and antidepressants. And it's like, nope, I've got fibroids, that sort of a thing. Anyway, they pay more to get second and third opinions, and people who have nothing to do with their care at their insurance companies enjoy calling and being like, hey, no, we're not going to cover this thing that your doctor said you needed. It fucking sucks. It sucks.
Yeah.
Single payer now.
And you know what?
Single payer
Ladies,
now.
Women have started really understanding too how menopause affects their bodies and are like seeking out treatment. And a lot of it's considered experimental. What? Mm-hmm. So you pay out of pocket. It's not fair, Erin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really something that's very fucked up. I have read is that hormone replacement therapy is something that's like very effective and helpful for a lot of women, but a lot of doctors won't prescribe it because of it. Anyway, it's like a whole thing. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks, and it shouldn't be like this, but it is. And I feel like until people get really, really, really mad, nothing is going to change.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Fuck.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, here's why you should be worried about Virginia, and here's what you can do about it. And welcome back. You're listening to Hysteria, the podcast for people who may or may not live in Virginia, but still put Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin near the top of their weasel list. We've got a weasel. We're making weasel come back. Alyssa and I were talking before we started recording. Weasel. Weasel is
We're making
the
Weasel
insult of,
happen.
Weasel is the insult of 2023. That voice you're hearing is our guest today. We're super excited to bring her on. So we've been talking about this year's November elections a lot on the pod lately because non-presidential elections have major stakes. And democracy is kind of like a garden. If you don't pay attention to it, you're probably not going to like what grows in it. So today, our guest is going to walk us through the upcoming Virginia election and its impact on everything from abortion to 2024, both in the Commonwealth and across the country. She's the co-executive director and co-founder of the New Virginia Majority, where she fights for multiracial communities and widespread civic engagement. Tram Nguyen, welcome to Hysteria.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
So this is a really contentious election. State legislature could turn into, one full of Youngkins if we're not careful. So how are you at New Virginia Majority preparing for November for an election where all 140 seats in the General Assembly are up for grabs? And how's the work going right now?
So we've been preparing for this for long before even this year started because we knew what was on the horizon. As soon as Governor Youngkin won in 2021, we were like, oh crap. We got to make sure that we don't give him a MAGA Republican trifecta, because the danger in all of that is what you see happening in Florida and all of these other states. So we've been preparing for this for a while. We've been on the doors since April, talking to voters about what's at stake in these elections, encouraging them to make a plan to vote. We've knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors already this year. We're talking to voters, and our plan is to win, right? We're in a number of targeted toss-up seats in the House and the Senate, and the plan is to take the Democratic majority.
So, Tram, the results of this election will decide how Democrat or Republican the state's legislature will be. In other words, the election will decide the fate of abortion in Virginia. How is the pro-abortion fight going in Virginia right now?
Abortion is definitely on the ballot. Our last legislative session earlier this year, we were one vote away from an abortion ban passing in our state legislature, right? One vote away. And that's how close we are, right? So the pro-abortion fight is going really well. Voters are very energized around it. We saw in Kansas and some of these other states that when we take the issue to the voters are overwhelmingly on the side of making sure that people have access to reproductive health care. There was a Democratic primary in June where when I said we were one vote away from an abortion ban, it was because Democratic Senator Joe Morrissey is not supportive of abortion. And so he was primaried in June. And we endorsed LaSharice Aird, his opponent back then, with Planned Parenthood and a number of organizations, and she won. So we feel like that is a good indicator, right, that abortion's really important to Virginia voters. The challenge we have in Virginia is that we can't take the issue directly to the voters. We are not a direct democracy state. We don't have ballot initiatives. And so abortion has to go through our legislature. And I think that's, if we were to have it on the ballot for all voters, I think, of course, Virginians are going to, knock it down, right? But since it has to go through the legislature, and each legislative district is either really Republican or really Democrat, and then there's some toss-ups, it's a little bit more of a challenge. And that's why this November's election is so critical, because all of abortion, voting rights, everything hangs in the balance.
Mm-hmm. So what local voices should we be paying attention to in addition to yours? Are there any Senate or House seat races that you find particularly interesting or motivating? And can you explain the so-called sore loser rule and why it's such a hot topic right now?
Oh, gosh, the sore loser rule. It is a hot topic. And I didn't realize it would be such a hot topic. The sore loser rule in Virginia is, so if you're involved in a primary, Republican or Democratic primary, a party primary, if you lose, you can't then turn around and, run on the same ballot as an independent, right? You just make that pledge. You don't get to run again. And there are a couple of candidates who lost their primary in June, that are trying to, they have a set of voters and supporters that are trying to get them to be on the ballot. One House Democratic candidate is suing the state because of the sore loser rule. So it's front and center. But it does have an impact because there is one particular Senate race, that is one of the toss-up races, one of the 4 critical toss-up races. And the sore loser, Republican candidate, is engaging in a write-in campaign. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens because it's already a 3-way race between a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent. And now you've had this dynamic where the Republican loser is doing a write-in campaign. And so I think that bodes well for Joel Griffin, who is a Democratic candidate in that district.
That sounds super interesting. And I also love sore loser rule. It's like harkens back to like playground because it's like, oh yeah, we all know what a sore loser is. How do you feel about the Loudoun County School Board election and its parents' rights activists? I'm using like air quotes here very heavily. Yeah. How do you feel about them?
The school board races, not only in Loudoun, but across the state, are big battlegrounds right now. I think that these activists are a vocal minority. They're, a very loud vocal minority, but is not the will and they don't share the same sentiments as the majority of parents in these places. But, the Republicans are using this whole parental rights framework as their rallying cry to get their base to turn out. And, but when we're on the doors and we're talking to voters, it's very clear that a lot of these most of the voters we talk to don't buy into that, right? Mm-hmm. When they think about what's really important for school boards and what's really important with our public education, it's making sure that our teachers have resources and the tools they need to teach our children, right? They want to make sure that, schools are adequately funded, the support staff is there. They just want their kids to have a quality education. All this other crap is just crap, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What I found really interesting about like a lot of this school board activism, book banning, whatever, if I feel like a lot of the people that are the most vocal about it don't even have kids in the actual schools. Like they're just outside agitators. Have you noticed that?
So funny.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? Have you noticed that in Virginia, that there's like outsiders who really don't have any business weighing in?
I think there's an element of that for sure. I think that's why it's like they're the vocal minority. There's just like this feel like sometimes it's like the same set of parents in quotes, adults who are going to school board meetings and you see some of the same faces. And like, well, how are you in Loudoun County this week and then somewhere else in another week, right? And so I do think that there's this, there's this facade, right? That this is an issue of real parents with schools and these, in these school systems. And that's really not what public education parents really are caring about.
Yeah. You know what? That would actually be really interesting fodder for a journalist in Virginia who wanted to cover who the agitators actually are, because they're showing up at different school board meetings. I think that's germane. It's super fascinating to me. I have a kid, and watching people who are like not parents deciding what kids should read just like completely blows my mind. It's like, why are you mind your own business? What else? Do something else. Anyway, that could be a whole can of worms.
It's a whole other thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Governor Youngkin. Okay. You guys, I have to tell you something. When I was growing up, I had a Halloween costume, and since it's spooky season, I've said Youngkin so many times in the past 24 hours. My mom was not good at Halloween costumes, and she got me this inflatable pumpkin that went on my head, and it was called a Wumpkin pumpkin. And when I hear Youngkin, that's all I see now is the Wumpkin pumpkin and me dripping sweat from having a plastic inflatable on my head smeared with green paint to look like a stem.
The 80s were wild. We put plastic on kids' heads. So what were we doing?
I remember that those masks.
Yeah. This is like, I'll find a picture and post it, but like every time I say Youngkin, I just hear Wunkin Punkin. But back to Governor Youngkin Wunkin Punkin. He sucks. And so, Tram, do you think a Democratic majority in the General Assembly is going to be enough to keep his power largely at bay?
I mean, this is a governor who thinks that he has a lot of executive powers, right? For example, when Virginia joined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, one of our environmental priorities, he took it upon himself to remove Virginia from it. And now he's facing some lawsuits because he doesn't have the power to do that, right? It's like, what are you doing? On rights restoration for folks that were, convicted of felonies, he's made it so much harder for people to get their rights restored. And in fact, we recently just discovered that he has been taking people who've had their rights restored by Governor Northam in his last year of office, Now we're hearing that if they make there's a technical violation on their parole, right? They forget to call in or something. Governor Youngkin's administration is taking their right to vote away. And it's like, that's illegal. You can't do that. And so, yes, this is a governor who, this administration, right, thinks that they have a lot of power that they don't. And we need to keep them in check.
Mm-hmm. It sounds exhausting. I'm sure like you, our listeners are feeling stressed about what could happen in Virginia in November. Do you have any suggestions for how we can put this pre-election nervousness into action?
Well, that's a tough question for me because I live in a state of perpetual anxiety. I don't sleep at night. It's just like, oh my gosh. And as I said to folks, if I'm not worrying, then you should be worried because like, how can you not worry with everything that's at stake? But I do believe that there's a path to victory and it's just an all hands on deck moment, right? Whether you're a Virginian or a non-Virginian, find ways that you can, be a part of what's happening here. Because frankly, what happens here is going to matter for 2024, right? Mm-hmm. If they are successful on, their abortion message, for example, which is really gross because, they're saying out now, they're using this whole, we don't support an outright ban. We support 15-week bans and it's like a ban is a ban, right? But it's working, right? And so I feel like if it works here and they win, then they're going to take that across the country and mislead a lot of Americans that, okay, the Republican Party does not believe in abortion bans when in fact they do, and they will do everything they can to restrict access to it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, pay attention and stay nervous. That is, that's our takeaway for Virginia. Tram, where can people follow the work that you're doing?
So our website, www.newvirginiamajority.org. That is all spelled out. It's long. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of information there in terms of some of the key races we're watching and that we're engaging in, how you can sign up, how you can volunteer. We have phone banks that people from all over the country join. So even if you don't live here, you can, participate. So all of that information is on our website.
Awesome. Tram Nguyen, thank you so much for joining us this week and keeping us up to speed about what's going on and what's at stake in Virginia this fall.
Awesome. Thanks for helping us spread the word.